Hey guys, welcome. So we're covering a new show today. I'm excited about this show because I've been looking forward to The Manifest on NBC ever since I heard that it was coming. And the concept is cool, right? It's kind of sci-fi slash fantasy, which you know is right up our alley. So we are going to be getting into this show today, and it's also part heavy drama as well. As a matter of fact, one of the cast members explained it as being a mix between Lost and This Is Us. So I was like, man, listen, we got to check it out. Hopefully you guys enjoy it. So let's get into it. I'm going to try and make this video not too long, but there's a lot to get into in this show. So let's get into it. So when the show opens, we find ourselves with the Stone family who is at the airport, and I believe they're in Jamaica, and they're all waiting for their flight to take off, and they're having a conversation. And we come into this conversation between the daughter and the mom at the very beginning, and the mom is quoting Romans 8:28, all things work for the good. So she's having this conversation with the daughter, and she's trying to get the daughter to see the relationship that she has back home is a good relationship, and she should really consider taking this relationship to the next level and actually marrying the dude. But when she quotes the Romans 8:28 verse, the daughter's response is, "Mom, I don't believe in that anymore." And it turns out something tragic has happened, and we're going to find out later in the show what that is. But she is resistant to the message of that verse. And then the family at whole was having a conversation with her again about how good this guy is and how she should really consider marrying this guy. Now her whole family is there, the extended family. You have grandma and grandpa, and then you have their children, which is the daughter we were just talking about. Her brother and his family is there. So he and his wife and their two kids that are twins are there, and they're all on their way home. Now it turns out of the two kids of the brother, one of them has leukemia, and that comes into play later on because it's important to note. So while they're all waiting, what we find out is that something's going on with the flight that they're all waiting for. And the airline comes on and says, listen, for anybody who is willing to take a different flight, we're going to give you a $400 voucher. So what happens is the daughter, her brother, and his son volunteer to take that flight. See the parallel there between Romans 8:28, the verse that grandma is always quoting to the daughter, or the verse that mom is always quoting to the daughter. So we notice that. Long story short, they get on the flight, and the brother and his sister are having some discussion again about the relationship. We can see her scrolling through her phone, looking at the pictures of the young man from home that she's considering on marrying. This is a good guy. You deserve this. You've got to, pursue this relationship. And she's having some dialogue with him back and forth about that. And then turbulent stuff falling out from the overhead compartment, falling off of people's laps. It's really violent. You almost feel like the top of the plane is being ripped off. But then that turbulence ends, the captain comes on and he apologizes, and he said he's not sure what happened. Whatever it was, it just kind of came from out of the blue. Land at JFK, New York. Then the pilot asks for clearance to land, but they don't give the pilot. So he gives who he is again and the plane as well, and then they're very confused and they divert the flight to another airport, and they don't let them land at the gate. They actually have them land on the tarmac. So what happens is when they get off the plane, we find out that this is a flight that's actually been missing for 5.5 years. And now all of a sudden they've touched down in New York. So as you can imagine, there's great confusion. And then to add to that, everybody on that flight has not aged at all. So when we get there, everybody is confused. The daughter yells out, "What's going on here? What's happening here?" The police officer comes over and says, "Listen, the problem here, lady, is that this flight has been gone for 5.5 years, and all of you all are presumed to be dead." Well, obviously they're not dead because they are there. So what happens is the people leave, folks, for 5.5 years, but then we find out some other things have happened in the meantime with the Stone family while they were on that flight. Now keep in mind, you guys, that they have not been on this flight. For them, it hasn't been 5 years. It's been whatever the time would have been for that flight, but for everybody else, 5 years has passed. So when they come back to the tarmac, the rest of the family comes. The grandfather is there, and the son's wife and daughter is there. And when the daughter sees the grandfather, she's really, really happy. And she says, "Where's mom?" And then the grandfather has to say, "Listen, your mom got sick and passed away, so we're sorry about that." And then she asks, "Where's the guy she's been dating?" And he couldn't make it because he had a work emergency. And then we switch to the son meeting up with his wife again and their daughter. So it's really interesting to know, right? Because remember, it's been 5.5 years. So the daughter is 10 years older than her twin. And she looks so much older than him, and the twin doesn't know how to react to that, so he kind of runs off. So these guys go, and they're really kind of trying to get back to their normal lives. But of course, everything has changed because it's been 5.5 years since they've been back to this place, and a lot of things have happened. So what we find out is that the daughter is actually staying with the brother downstairs, and she starts to hear a voice in her head that turns out to be her own voice, just kind of saying things. So the first thing that she hears is the Romans 8:28, all things work for the good. But she kind of ignores it because she's, she feels like she heard it, but she's not really sure. So she ignores it. And throughout this episode, she still continues to hear different voices in her head. Well, later on, she goes and she's on a bus and she hears another voice that says, stop or slow down or something like that. First, the voice is kind of still, it's kind of small, it's kind of quiet. And then she hears it again. So then she tells the bus driver, stop or slow down. And the bus driver's like, I don't tell you how to do your job. But then she hears the voice again that says, stop or slow down now. And she yells it out. The bus driver hits the brakes. And as he does that, a little boy runs out in front of the bus, grabbing his ball. He doesn't get hit. So the bus driver's freaking out, and he's looking at the lady like, wow, like, how did you know that? I didn't even see it coming. And she's just kind of looking there, and she's shocked. She doesn't know. She's hearing the voices in her head, so she can't really explain what is going on. She just knows that she's hearing these voices. Anyway, she gets back to where she used to work at the precinct, and, they're all welcoming her back, and everybody's happy to see her, and she meets up with the guy that she was dating. And during the midst of the conversation that she's having with him, she sees the ring on his finger. And she just kind of stops and she's like, who is she? And then the guy has to break it to her that it's actually your best friend. And she just doesn't know how to take that. And his response to her is like, listen, it's been 5.5 years. And for 2.5 years, I couldn't even look at another woman. But then I guess finally he got into a relationship with her best friend. And then they got married. So she's dealing with all of that. Now, if we jump to the brother, he's kind of dealing with his own issues as well, as he's trying to rebuild the relationship with his daughter, because prior to the flight, he really spent most of the time with his son, as he was really kind of trying to get his son as much help as he could with the leukemia. So he's now really trying to rebuild that relationship with his daughter while also trying to help the son, and also really kind of trying to mend things or catch up with his wife. But then we do find that the wife actually has a secret. It turns out that she's been dating somebody in his absence. Again, he's been gone for 5.5 years, but she hasn't shared that with him. So we find out that that whole dynamic is going on, and he still doesn't know that there is kind of like someone else, and she's kind of trying to find the right time to share that with him. The daughter knows, of course, and the wife knows, but he doesn't know. So he's dealing with that in the midst of really kind of trying to get reacclimated to things and also trying to help his son. But what we also find out is that he is hearing voices as well. So one of the things that happens is pretty interesting is that the sister is continuing to hear voices. And after that whole bus incident, she goes and she has to talk with her brother, and she asks her brother, listen, are you hearing things? And the brother's like, no, and talk like that will get you in the loony house, basically. And she gets mad at him and she says, don't psychoanalyze me. And he's like, listen, given what just happened, you don't think that the government is watching us? Given what just happened, you don't think that people want to know what's going on with us? You talking like that will have you on a slab somewhere with your brain being carved up. So don't say things like that because people are watching. Now, at this point, we don't know that he's hearing the voices because he has not admitted that. But then later on, we see her running. She's on just like a jog or something, and she runs past this yard that has these 2 dogs in the inside, and they're chained up. And the voice in her head again says, set them free. And it says it a couple of times, and she just stops, and she just kind of stares at the log and stares at the dogs. But she ignores it, and she keeps on running. And then later on that night, we find out that the voice says the same thing, and it's so compelling that she actually gets up out of her sleep, and we see her going down to where the dogs were that she saw earlier. And she's about to open the gate, and then a car pulls around the corner, and it turns out it's her brother. And she's surprised because she asks, how did you know that I was here? And he says, I came to set them free. And she gets mad at him because she says, listen, you told me that I was crazy when I told you that I was hearing things earlier. And he says, listen, I know, but I don't need this drama. Like, I don't want to be caught up in any kind of foolishness, people examining me. I got too much stuff on my plate. I've got my son. I've got the relationship with my daughter. I don't need all of this. But he was compelled enough to come down there and cut those chains off to set those dogs free. So he does take his chain clipper, or whatever they call it, the lock clipper, and they end up cutting the fence and they let the dogs out. Now, what they don't know is that a neighbor is recording this whole thing all along, and she sends it to the police. And the police actually send that recording to the guy, the detective that she was going to marry, and he's concerned. So he's like, what's going on here? So he goes down to talk to her, basically to help her out because what she's committed essentially is a crime. And he asks her what is going on, and she really can't say what's going on. And he assumes it's because he married her best friend. And she says, no, that's not the case. She says, listen, all that I'm dealing with here is really, oh, excuse me, guys. All that I'm dealing with here is really all that's going on. It doesn't really have anything to do with you and marrying my best friend. I mean, after all, I was gone for 5.5 years. I can't expect for you to be mad about that. So he says, okay, what is it then? And she's like, I really can't say. And he doesn't really push it. What he does is he tells her, listen, we'll go get cleaned up, basically, put some clothes on, because we're going back down there to where you guys set those dogs free. And we're going to return those dogs. And we're actually also going to speak to the owner to see if we can clear this mess up. So they go back down there to speak to the owner. And while they're getting ready to go into the gate, she has another voice she hears in the head, but she doesn't tell him that. He just sees her reaction, and she kind of winces in pain. And he asks, are you all right? And she says, yeah, I'm fine. And then he says, well, maybe you should wait in the car while I go talk to the guy. So she waits in the car. He goes in, basically returns the dogs. And while he's talking to the dogs, or while he's talking to the guy, she also hears another voice in her head that says, set them free. So she begins to go in to kind of like the yard and investigate. And the voice is kind of leading her to a door, essentially, while the detective is still inside talking to the guy, saying, listen, I'd appreciate if you would consider not pressing charges as kind of like a personal favor. I'll make sure I pay for the damages, but the person who did this is really going through some things. And the guy's response is, absolutely, I'm not trying to put anybody in jail. I'm just happy that the dogs are back. I don't plan on pressing any charges. Well, in the meanwhile, she's outside and she's kind of looking around the yard, and she finds this door. Now, what I didn't mention is that earlier there were 2 girls that were found missing, or there were 2 girls like 3 days ago that had gone missing. So she bangs on this lock, right? And she's banging and banging and banging, and finally she knocks the lock off. While she's doing that, the detective and the owner come out and say, what are you doing? They're telling her to stop. What are you doing? And she continues just to bang. She doesn't pay any attention to them till she bangs enough and the lock falls off the door. And lo and behold, you guys know what's going to happen. The door opens and we see the 2 girls inside. So meanwhile, when the guy who owns that yard sees that, he picks up a rod and he starts to try and hit the detective in the back of the head. But she sees it just in time and yells out, and the detective ducks and takes the guy down and arrests the guy. So it turns out that the voices actually led her to the missing girls. So now she just really doesn't really understand or know what's going on. But she goes back to the police station and she gets accolades for being able to kind of find the girls and solving the crime. And now they're thinking about putting her back on the street. Prior to that, she was on a desk job. And here's where I said before that there was a tragedy that happened. So something happened. We don't know the full details, but it sounds like she was either with a partner or with someone else, and that partner got killed as a result of some kind of action that she did or didn't take. And she's really having a hard time getting over that. But after the events of her finding the girls, they're really thinking about actually reinserting her and putting her back on the street. So from then on out, we do find out that a lot of people on that plane are kind of experiencing all of these different occurrences. Guys, I want to stop actually and go back for something because this is important. So we talked about the son having leukemia, and one of the people that were on that plane was a doctor that was working on a cure. Now, it turns out that she was on that plane, and during the turbulence, the very laptop where she was working on her research fell and broke. So she thought that she had lost all of her information. She thought that she had lost all of her research, all of her data. But she hadn't. So when she gets back, when the plane lands and she gets back and she gets off the plane, she finds out that they actually got her research 5.5 years ago, and the results have been stellar, and they've been treating kids and helping a lot of different kids with leukemia for a long time. So she's really happy about that. She's really excited about that. And she's at a board meeting, and they're looking at different cases of kids to treat with the remedy that she's come up with. And the little boy comes up on the list. The little stone boy comes up on the list, and they're looking at him. But they decide as a team that, well, they really can't treat him because technically he's out of the time parameters of the trials. But she says, no, he's not. Because if you look at him now, he is the same chronological age that he was before that flight touched down. So he is really still within the time frame, even though technically it's been 5.5 years. But in terms of his examination, everything with him physically is still the same as it was whenever he boarded that flight. So he's still eligible, but they say no, they turn it down. Now, what we think is going on here is the reason that they turn it down is they don't want it to hurt the trials because a major drug company is probably likely to take over and buy that drug, and they don't want anything disturbing that process. So she gets mad. She walks out. She reconnects. She finds the guy, finds the little boy, and she finds a way to actually have that little boy treated. So that's important to say. So all these folks now are beginning to recognize that things are different. They're all kind of either having these headaches or having these flashes or kind of having these cognitive moments. Everybody on that flight has been affected in some kind of way. Now, prior to the ending of the episode, the brother and sister think that it's only those two, and she even asks, like, what is it about us? Why are we the ones so special? And then the brother says, what if we aren't the only ones that were chosen? And then we see this scene kind of open up where we look at all the different people, or a lot of the different people that were on that plane, and they're all kind of having these kind of episodes. So we know that they're all experiencing this, and they're all kind of pulled to the airport of where the plane landed, and you can see them outside the gate looking at the plane beyond the gate, because the detectives are planning to break that plane apart piece by piece and figure out what in the world happened. But then all of a sudden we see the plane blow up, and she's kind of narrating this. The daughter is narrating at this whole time, and she says something to the effect, well, it's clear whatever force was the cause of the events that happened, it's clear they don't want the people here knowing what happened or the reason why it happens, and thus the plane blows up. And then she says one thing for sure, this is only the beginning, and that's how it ends. So that was a lot. You guys, this episode actually had a lot of stuff in it, and I liked the episode. I do agree with some people who talked about it that did say it felt a little bit rushed, but I felt like it kind of had to be rushed to really kind of set up and establish what we needed to have in place for episode 2, which actually comes out tomorrow night on Monday. So I liked it. I enjoyed it, you guys. I thought that it was interesting. I thought that it was engaging, and it's good. It has a lot of different elements for us to follow and to get into outside of just the supernatural or sci-fi aspect, but the whole kind of just social aspect of what happens when you come back, right? And you're in a situation. You've been gone for 5.5 years. A lot of things can change in 5.5 years. So all of these people are coming back to lives that are very different than what they left for them just a couple of hours ago. So having to readjust, having to reacclimate, and to get themselves back into the normal course of things, while at the same time having the government following their every step, wanting to know what's going on, and them experiencing these kind of different experiences. I wouldn't necessarily call them superpowers, but these experiences, all this is going on. So this makes for what could be a pretty good show. Now the trick here is this, is that the show was able to maintain a good balance of kind of sci-fi thriller and also deep drama. And that can be hard to do. So we'll be able to see, or we'll see if they're able to pull that off. And that's what I want to see. But all in all, I enjoyed this. So what did you guys think about this? If you saw it, what are your thoughts? If you saw it, is it something that you think that you can get into? Guys, let me know in the comments below. Thank you so much as always. If you are a guest here, definitely appreciate you stopping by. Please make sure if you like this to hit that like button. Please make sure to comment below. Let's get into this in the comments. And also, guys, please share this if you found it share worthy. Don't forget that we have ITB Into the Badlands videos every Thursday and every Tuesday and Thursday. And we will actually also be talking about Venom, which will be coming out this weekend. Guys, thank you so much as always. I definitely appreciate you. And with that, I will see you on the next video.